So I'm Matt Buckhurst. I'm one of the creative directors at FutureBrand, and brought along Adam Savage, who was my number two on doing the Olympics. And we started on the Olympic programme about 3.5 years ago, when we as FutureBrand and McCann Erickson came together as McCann World Group to actually, were appointed to do the complete branding of the Olympics, and that was both from a graphic design point of view and from a communications and a sort of commercial point of view. So looking at every aspect of how we actually tell a story around the games. So we're part of a much wider group, and that's why we won the job to actually sort of do it. And it was the first time 3 years out that actually a marketing support group was basically taken on by an OCOG, an organising committee. It was the first time an agency group, as opposed to a single entity like a FutureBrand, came together to offer full services. And also, first time as an official sponsor, so we did it all for free. So, all you in here have your own little businesses or whatever, yeah. So I cannot remember how many million we offered up, but it was all value in kind. So basically, all our time and our team's time was offered, for free. And it was the first time that there was a total integration with the OCOG. So we very much worked aligned with their design teams and aligned with their sort of communication teams in-house. I know we've only got half an hour, and this is a massive project, so I'm going to flick through this. So 2008, we all remember the opening ceremony, we all remember Beijing, but of course the world had changed since then. I mean, the economic downturn. Beijing spent, and again these are kind of rounded up figures, about £45 billion on the games. We spent somewhere in the region of 9 billion, and of course there were quite different measures. We had to have a zero to waste landfill, 98% of waste had to be recycled, there were lots of other parameters which were different to Beijing. But also social media had changed. If you think about, the internet users, 1.5 back in 2008, 2.3, in 2012. So how changed it was. But look at the tweets, 300,000 tweets per day, 400 million tweets per day in 2012. So, exponentially, come on, massive, So, think about the way the world was communicating. So it's kind of a different world to Beijing 4 years on. It's only 4 years, it'd be amazing. So what we had to do is we had to be, I do it this way. We had to be much more accountable to everything we did and sustainable. It had to be obviously much more affordable. We had to collaborate with a lot more organisations, cultural arts organisations. You can imagine working in the UK, there's lots of bodies you have to work with and satisfy everybody's needs. I mean, the press is hungry for information about how we work together with all these different organisations. So much more collaborative, much more inclusive. I think inclusive is a really good word, particularly as right now, and I was lucky enough to go to the opening ceremony Wednesday night. The Paralympic Games have come home, and it's an amazing feat. And actually, I was quite emotional that night because I think it really has come home, and the amazing support the UK has given not only to the Olympics but now to the Paralympics. So absolutely about being more inclusive, and that goes to the design work we did in terms of the Paralympic Games. And of course, the Financial Times said the task of promoting the London Olympics is probably the biggest assignment in the history of UK marketing. I mean, it is phenomenal, what you have to do in terms of communications and design to actually achieve that. So I'll quickly whiz through this. So obviously FutureBrand are part of McCann World Group, which includes McCann, the advertising agency, and Jack Morton, the events organisers, and so on and so forth. So we have a pot of organisations we could go to for any help, but basically the majority of the work was done by FutureBrand from a graphic design point of view and McCann from an advertising point of view, and we will often work closely together as two agencies. 27,000 deliverables in terms of briefs and design. It wasn't just the look of the games, it was the run-up to that, all the different campaigns and organisations and sponsoring the Cultural Olympiad, which is getting arts involved in the games, and really a massive amount of briefs that we had to work to, from the countdown clock to the way the cities look to the Cultural Olympiad to working with the GLA in the City of London. So you can imagine all the stakeholders we had to deal with. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of people, all had an opinion. I mean, particularly in the UK, you can imagine the opinions that we had to deal with. My God, So we call this making the complex simple. How do you do an Olympic Games? And the first way we had to do it was basically come up with a core theme and idea. McCann Erickson sort of led this in terms of communications idea. It's creating something that we could all go back to and say, are we actually fitting this idea? I'm sorry, you can't really see that in this room, but it says it's all about uniting the different functions and stakeholders together under a core theme, making sure that we connect young people to sport and the values of the Olympics and Paralympics, because that's fundamental. That's really what it's there to do. Giving a voice to inspiring stories. How are we going to tell those stories and engage people and get them enthusiastic about what the Games represents? and to really collectively create an extraordinary festival of human endeavour. And that festival of human endeavour, I think, really works both from an Olympic and a Paralympic point of view. And ultimately, and this was the kind of call to action, inspire the nation to push beyond our personal best. So pushing beyond your personal best was the key mantra. Quite a simple idea. You know, most athletes go to an Olympics and a Paralympics not expecting to get medals, but really just achieving their best result. And we can see that even now watching the swimming going on at the moment. You know, it's not just about winning medals. And it's not also just about sport, it's also about everything you do in life. So that's why the Cultural Olympiad's so important. And that's why this really works with that. Because it's about art and culture and dance and getting people with disabilities to get involved in those kind of areas. So it's not just about sport. Now let's get to the kind of sexy bit, which is all about design, you know. So how do you create a complete brand experience for the games? Well, when we started, and this is the controversial bit, we inherited a lot of the assets. And I am going to ask this question. This is kind of my warm-up now, because I'm looking forward to this bit. Okay. So since we're in a classroom, since we are a classroom, it says on the wall there, so I can ask this question. Hands up those that you thought that the Olympic emblem was a fantastic piece of design and really different and engaging, and really enjoyed what that piece of work was done. Good. And that, you know. Okay, hands up those thought it was an abomination, didn't really work. Okay. Hands up those who got a different opinion now that they see it in execution and delivered through the games. And right, see, I thought this would happen because I've seen this in all the blogs that have come along, and I've been reading all these blogs. You don't look at a logo in isolation, and I think it's terribly unfair. You know, I've worked in corporate identity for 25 years of my life, not corporate identity, in branding. You get that right, because it's all about all the other ways you communicate and all the other stories you tell. That's just the thumbprint, it's the start point, it's the signature of the games. And actually for us, it was a great start point. We just felt that it just didn't really have a core idea that would work for us to deliver a look and feel of the games. You know, it certainly, you know, had an edgy quality. It was different because it kind of united both the Paralympic and Olympics together, whereas before they had two separate logos in most cases. And para means, you know, working alongside, and that's where the Paralympics comes from. It's about together, you know, and the idea that, you know, London should be about uniting all of these sportsmen, whatever their ability. So we came up with a creative idea which was built and basic on the assets that we found. So we had a logo, and this logo was created by this dynamic grid, and we said, well, there's something really exciting about this, but we just don't think it's been made use of. You know, so we came up with the idea, and where everything would copy, we wrote this sort of loose copy to kind of bring it all together. Explosion of energy bursts out of the heart of our identity in all directions, connecting everyone and bringing everyone together to inspire and share with everybody the spirit of the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And we came up with this idea that, you know, the heart of the logo is actually this energy, and it reaches out and brings people back to London, to the heart of the East End, to the Olympic Park, and ultimately to the athletes on the field of play. So we said, well, there's something really nice about this kind of basic concept of this burst that existed in this asset that we already had. So we said, well, you know, let's take this idea and actually turn it into the visual identity system. And there were a few things that we had to work with. So what we call the look guiding principles. One of them was not just to communicate, not just to decorate. And if we remember Beijing, they kind of covered the world in expensive scrim and covered buildings up in cloud patterns. And, you know, to my point, and it's in this economic time, it's just a bit gratuitous. We needed to kind of just make the design work hard and give it a role to play. You know, we were very important to us when we looked at Beijing was to make this a design system that people could interpret, because lots of other agencies got involved in doing elements of it. And as Adam said, lightness of touch, legacy, to leave something behind in the built environment that's a reminder of you of the games. Sustainability we've already talked about. I don't need to say anymore. You know all the issues around that. And transition between Olympics and Paralympics. Now, one of the things we decided was to do one look for the games. Okay, one look for the city, for the Paralympics, for the Olympics, for every piece of communication. So there was just a simple bit of transition between having to have sponsors, which they do for the Paralympics, and obviously switching in and out the Olympic rings for the Gitos or Agitos. I never know how you're supposed to say that. So that was some of the criteria. And so, you know, let's go straight into this sort of design work. So one of the things we did with that idea of the burst graphic was actually work with Populous and the architects and look at how we could actually, on a macro scale, build it into the environment. So we literally placed the grid over the stadium and then created a burst out from the stadium, just simply using the assets we already had. You know, seating. You see it time and time again in football stadiums, you know, writing the name of the club. Well, why don't we actually start to create the look just through the assets we have, and into the concrete treatments around the around the venues, literally layering in this burst. So you've got this, you don't see it when you're down on the ground, you're just aware of these changing textures and patterns. But the aerial shots, and when you're in the stadium, when it's half full, you start to see these sort of bursts happening. So at a very macro scale, we said, well, let's start to just integrate it into the environment and make it a bit different. So rather than just covering it in scrim, just think about, how we actually embed it into the architecture. And we were there yesterday watching the Paralympic basketball, which is, I think, actually more exciting than the Olympic basketball. I love the wheelchairs, it's great. But it was kind of, at the beginning it was half full, so you still get that sense of that sort of texture and things going on, as well as the kind of the hoardings and designs that go around the stadium. So it kind of really worked very well. So talking about, Adam mentioned that the colour palette, we were given through Wolf Ohlins a range of colours, and it's sort of multicoloured brands, and we all know that multicoloured brands are a nightmare to work with. We've all probably been there before. I remember the old Abbey logo and stuff. It doesn't always kind of work. So we said multicoloured brand in the common domain around the city, where you want to create the sense of festival. But going back to this whole idea about communicating and not just decorating, as Adam said, we paired up colours to represent different kinds of sports. So high energy sports had more clashy colours, used the pink, the vibrant pink and the oranges, and the kind of water sports used basically the kind of blue background, each with an accent colour. And this colour strategy then worked across the seating. So if you look down each column, each of these represented the field of play, the hoardings and graphics we would use, the seating we would use. And so there was this kind of intuitive wayfinding, and that kind of went right through to the ticketing. So that you had a ticket, it had a sort of representation of your sport colour, the website did, the seating did, the venue colouring, and the lead up, the 1 mile to go before the venue, you'd recognise the colour starting to build into your particular sport colour. So it had a sort of communications role. When we were briefed by Local, we were briefed by the sports managers. We went to see Big Bob, the photographer down there, who looks after all the photographers. We will talk to the Olympic Broadcast Service about colours, how they appear on TV screens, where to locate certain items, what would be issues. Because the one thing is that, we're lucky enough, if we're in London, lucky enough to get a ticket to go along, but actually most of this is viewed through the television, and through photographic imagery later in sports magazines. And as Adam said, it was all about that sense of time and place that you get. The look plays an important part in kind of like linking you back to 2012 and what that represents. And I think you've probably all seen the aerial shots as well. The only thing you could see in the park was the blue and pink hockey stadium. So kind of quite a big statement for the Hockey Federation. And I'm just going to flick through these. So, again, talking about how the colour system worked throughout, right down to the Games Time websites that were built. And you can start to see how sort of the language all kind of works together and sits together. And the guys that actually did this, there was a team of 20 people in Locog of kind of implementation artists that then finally did the detail work. We didn't, thank God, we didn't have to work out every last bit of where the colours and where the scrim and where it would have to go, because they had to work very closely with sports managers to achieve that. And also, exactly where the ring should go. And the beautiful velodrome, it's just absolutely amazing. So I'll just flick through some of these shots showing some of the sort of the venues that we had. I mean, a couple of successful venues were the hockey, and then of course down at Horse Guards Parade. And the one colour we got to actually invent ourselves was actually the purple, because it was really interesting. I hope we are recording this, aren't we? We presented this work to Boris Johnson to implement around the City of London, and he was a little bit concerned because some of the examples we'd shown were of the basketball arena, where we'd used the pink quite a lot. He said, I'm not sure about the pink around the city. So we came to a compromise. The pink would be this standout wayfinding. Exactly. Well, but there was a good point. So suddenly we made that colour actually a communications device. So the wayfinding, the people in those outfits, it was a colour that would pop out and sort of jar, which is what you wanted it to do. So it became the wayfinding colour. And then we introduced purple, because the purple, being a regal colour, a regal year, and also works really well against stone buildings, the ironwork and architecture of London. And also the thing about purple, which we sort of found out later, we half knew, but it doesn't really exist in anybody's flag or anybody's outfit. So actually it was a great colour, accent colour, in which all the flags and uniforms and the dress of all the sports persons would stand out against. So it actually became a beautiful foil against the City of London. And so this was just one example. And talking about how you use design as a design system, and here's a classic Getty image, where the look actually becomes part of, where that was, London 2012, because there's not a word that says London there, but the graphic and the language immediately speaks of that. But what Populous did was they took our idea about taking the design system into a three-dimensional world, and they started to use this sort of angular flag bannering on these kind of temporary structures, the Sutton pictogram looking amazing on the facade there. Just really starting to not just simply cover it in a graphic, but actually play with it a bit.
Lightness of touch, again, going back to those principles that we set up early on. Lightness of touch.
Yeah, I mean, these things, if you cover the thing, cost a fortune, and also then you have to get rid of it at the end of the day, so not very economical. So again, just using touches. And of course, the other thing that helped us with look was the beautiful backdrop of London. I mean, that's just incredible, And the one thing that the Getty photographer said is, whoever decided to put beach volleyball and Horse Parade, the riding in Greenwich, did a fantastic job, because that was half the battle to creating a real signature look to London. And then, of course, on the field of play in the stadium, the use of the purple as a sort of standout colour and kind of very distinctive colour against all the other national flags. And I'll just flick through some of the pictures. So even the kind of the games time information and the little movies and videos they show about sports will link to the colour strategy and link to the graphics that we created. And again, I'm just showing you some of these fantastic Getty images, because they kind of really do set it in that time and place and show you how the language sort of looked. And we've even got it on a stamp. Jessica Ennis has got the look at the bottom of her stamp, so that's great. So you can say it works on the stamp, Adam. Yeah. So it just shows you how it kind of really kind of accented well against all the sports persons, and of course the main man himself. God, wasn't he cool? But even even again, fantastic sporting venues and heritage venues across London, and again using the purple because a great accent for the green and for the environment there. And here we use for this particular sport, for the archery, we use the accent colour of our green with the purple and kind of gave it a real sort of dynamic look. Right down to Eton Dorney on a good day. Look at that. We did have some sunshine after all. So again, using the burst graphics as appropriate when and where, but not just covering everything in it, just giving it a kind of sensitive touch. And I think that was a beautiful venue as well. Right down to the football stadiums, which I think it looks like they did get a bit of a crowd in the end, but they were the hardest ones to sell tickets to, as you could imagine. And in the aquatic centre, where I was lucky enough to go and see the 400-metre women's with Becky Adlington. That was noisy, very noisy. It was great. Okay, lots of pictures. Right down to how it's used in the press conferences. The game sign vehicles, we work very closely with BMW, and I think they did a fantastic job. Their company, Charterhouse, which is a BMW company that does all the kind of graphicking work, made it look like a paint job on these vehicles. I mean, it was just really incredible. We designed it to kind of make it flow and work with all their different kind of series cars. And then, of course, the idea was we simply transitioned this to a Paralympic badge. Then my favourite bit, the ribbons. I was lucky enough to work with the. Sometimes as a creative director, you just kind of point, do that. Oh, that's nice. Carry on, do some more. I actually got to design the ribbons myself. So that was And so I've got a sample here. You can't have. It's hands off. A very rare thing. But again, it was all about using the design system and just taking it on a journey and finding a way of interpreting it for this particular item. So here, rather than just kind of put patterns all up and down the side, we said, well, let's make the medal and the rings the focal point and create the little burst coming off it. So working with the Royal Mint, and then I can't remember the name of the firm, but there was an old craft firm that does all the kind of ribbons for the soldiers, all the medal ribbons, working in silks. And we worked with them to actually I designed the ribbon and then got them to kind of do some samples. And the idea is the ribbon is then stitched with the twist in it, so hopefully, not all the time, some people put the metal ribbons on people very badly, but it should sit beautifully like that, and then you kind of get this amazing burst of just the 3 different silk colours we had to work with to give us that look and feel. But I think created quite a distinctive looking medal design. And then also the actual ceremonies, and I unfortunately haven't got a picture of the beautiful uniforms that were created by the Royal College of Fashion, but this Royal College of Art designed the podium, and again they took the burst graphic idea, but they took it in 3 dimensions, so they extruded it, and that was one of the things we wanted that any of the agencies that were working on other bits of the games to do, was actually look at how you can just explore and take it on a journey, and the podiums look fantastic, again in the purple, which was the ceremony colour, because again it was a great standout colour against all of the athletes' uniforms and flags, etc. So when we presented to all the agencies and communications groups that were doing extra stuff beyond ourselves, we talked about looking at this as the Serpentine Gallery. I can't remember who the architect who did that, but think about how you start to translate this not just a graphic world, but into a 3D world, and interpret it in terms of shapes and forms. And so some of the kiosks, and if you think about the signing, kind of started to live the language. And just think about how you extrude the logo. So these are some of the things we took the Wolf Elements logo and extruded it 3 dimensions and then 2 dimensions through the shatter of the grid, and started to look at shapes and forms. Here we go, we got that kind of screening area that you get in the Tate Modern. So just think about how you start to extrude it. So just don't think of it as a graphic design piece, flat 2D graphics. Just think about how you bring it to life. Come on. Oh, and yeah, and even the Someone pictograms, we did the same thing to those. So they were like a 2D graphic, looked great on tickets and great on some bannering, but Hornby and I think it was Royal Dalton wanted to create these figurines, and the first ones they did were kind of like all rounded and looked like little tin soldiers and didn't really work. So we took them back to the office and we said, well, let's take the Someone pictograms and let's give a 3-point sort of vector and 3-dimensionalize them and create something that actually looks like it belongs to the language of 2012. And so we developed these basic schematics and then handed them off to Hornby and handed them off to Royal Dalton to do their kind of figurines, and I think they look fantastic what they've achieved with those. And then the architects that developed the final signing system, these fantastic sort of entry gates, basically used that kind of philosophy and then turned that into a very distinctive language, so that it wasn't just about the graphics. You know, there's a bit of texture and graphics applied to these, but it was about the 3-dimensional form that started to reflect the identity. And I think that's where it became very much a design system rather than just applying a coat of paint to everywhere. It actually had a look and feel from the smallest item, like the ribbons that had a role to play and related to the medal, right down to the large signing, right down to the stadium seating. And then, of course, we had Address the UK, and these are some sketches. We had a workshop with all the great and good of the GLA, and we kind of worked with them in terms of ideas about how you might put the rings in the Thames, how you might even use the pictograms, dancing across bridges. If only they did some of this stuff, but you know, again, you know, the cost prohibitive. But some great ideas and a good start point. You have to go way out there to come back a bit to play with these. And they came up with the idea of actually using the mascot in a clever way in terms of doing the kind of like the Elephants Parade around London, putting the mascots out. But all of this was the start point. And then simply how you start to create the dressing of the UK. And these are just some rough photoshops, but we developed a lookbook for the GLA, which actually gave you, it was about 10 pages of listings of different planting that had the right colours and ideas of how you can plant shars and bursts and roundabouts. And you know, just think about not just sticking a banner up, but think about how you can really embed this festival flavour of 2012 into the environment, down to simple things like the right colour gel to light a building. So, you know, just trying to use things that are already there, or things that people would do anyway, and just get them to kind of link it back to 2012. And some games time facts, you know, how far Usain Bolt runs and how fast he did it in, and long jumps, etc. And then this started to appear across London and the UK in terms of how the city was dressed. Some of it more traditionally, others playing with the kind of ideas of the burst graphics. Some of it executed great, some of it not as good as we'd liked. Some games time facts, you know, the long jump. So just trying to, you know, embed that story into the whole world to one look right across the UK, as well as all the stadiums and venues, right down to live sites and local dressing and bannering, and then basically local authorities could buy a whole kit of parts to dress their environment. And then how are we doing?
Got about 5 minutes.
5 minutes? I'll whiz through this. Whiz through these. So these are what we call key milestone projects, things that had to be done, in particular with us and McCann Erickson, in terms of meeting key objectives. So, for example, the first one was, how do you sell the tickets? Well, you'd have thought that would be damn easy, wouldn't you? But actually, you know, think about all the tickets people want to go. They want to go to the cycling, they want to go to Usain Bolt's 100-metre final. They don't want to go to necessarily to taekwondo, etc. So McCann Erickson developed a campaign that was all about the greatest tickets on earth. It was all about just going to the Olympics and seeing these amazing events and seeing the best people in the world at those events. Never mind, you can't get to the one you'd like to go. Why not just go to the XL and go and see some taekwondo? It's an exciting atmosphere. It's the Olympics, you know. So it was all about trying to promote even the XL, you know, as maybe not a sort of glamorous place, but actually, you know, but it's going to be an amazing event. And so that was the idea around the campaign, and they used some of our assets and some of our work within those campaigns. I think they still struggle with the football, though, you know, because it's so big in this country, you know, that we have, you know, with the championships, and it's difficult to sell Olympic football. But, you know, really kind of, you know, great photo shoots. And, of course, none of this existed, so all these were going to have to be kind of rendered and created from scratch. I saw this yesterday, it's fantastic, you know, sport like never before, you know, creating a campaign around, you know, thinking about Paralympics as just amazing sport. Don't think about disability. That's what we're all trying to avoid. Just think of them as incredible sports persons. And the idea here was to actually talk about the sport. I love this one. It really was like that yesterday. Tilt at 46 degrees, you're a hero, you've got it in the basket. One more degree, you're over, it's game over, and it was really like that. And so really create that kind of feeling of excitement and energy around all of these Paralympic sports. Done in a slightly sort of Nike way, with the illustrations, kind of really punchy and bold, and I think even more dramatic than the Olympic campaign. And then one of the things that we had to work on, and there's two big projects that we had to work on, these ones we'll skip through very quickly, was we did the whole branding for the Olympic torch relay. And this was using Wolf Holden's idea of actually using the symbol embedding design into it. And then we had to work with BA on the plane that went out to Athens. So I love painting. I've painted a few planes in my past and a couple of jobs. It's nothing better. It's boys' toys. I mean, it's a giant Airfix kit, isn't it? You go in there and you go, oh, look at that. Hey, yeah. So, and we literally had one plane, we had about 2 weeks to design it and then about 2 weeks to paint it. So, and they only had 3 colours we could work with, I think it was it 3 or 4? So how do we translate that? And so we literally did this kind of random grid pattern, and again you're working in total 3 dimensions, no time to do sexy models of it, so we kind of worked on this, and I think it succeeded. The only thing you might have noticed, they didn't quite stick down the decals very well, so when it arrived in Cornwall, half the name of the plane had fallen off. They didn't varnish it properly, but it doesn't matter, it still had the impact. And the one thing you always have to work with the Olympics is sponsors. They're the bugbear of every designer, I think. So we've always had to build into that, any identity system, and you might have noticed it back there in terms of the torch as well, somewhere to put the sponsor logos. So we hate it, oh, there's a nice pure one, oh, stick the sponsor logos in. But we've all been there. So we had to, again, have to work with the sponsors and get them to approve it. Same with McDonald's and games makers. I'll flick through this really quickly. Volunteering, 60 million people in the UK. How do you get 70,000 volunteers out of that? Basically, it was a campaign making sure that everybody knew realistically what it meant. I'm going to turn quickly to not that one, this one here. So here we go, 10 days giving directions, 10 nights with a sore throat, just so you can tell the grandkids you made the Olympic and Paralympic Games happen. So it's a sense of, wow, look what I'm working for, but it's going to be work, and you could be packing boxes in the warehouse for this, but it's for the greater good. And I think, the one thing that's really come out of this was the amazing games makers. And then with that, took them to a website and again tested their desire to actually do it and be realistic. So it was a little game that the McCann Manchester created the website to take you through a game and just make sure they got the right people. And then the volunteering incentives with them were then basically interviewed and then given the Games Time role. And well, we've all seen these people, they're amazing. God knows how at midnight or midnight they can still smile and say have a good evening, when they've been sat there all day long and must be completely pissed off. So and even the Queen said, I congratulate to the organisers of the games as well as the thousands of volunteers who have epitomised the Olympic spirit, which they certainly did, through a warm welcome. They've shown the sporting teams and spectators from all around the world. I'm going to whiz through this, and we did the shop, so we had to design the shop. St Pancras was the first one, using our design assets, bringing that to life, thinking about the store, how you flow through the store. And then we worked with partners, we did the clock, way back when, again, based around the system. We've told you about BMW. I think this is fantastic. Clean field of play, no advertising on the field of play for an Olympics. BMW get little models of their cars whizzing up and down. It doesn't have to say BMW anywhere, but it's a Mini, it's BMW. But because of the look, the IC said, oh yeah, it's one of our cars, So that was a coup d'etat, really was, from BMW. We worked on corporate hospitality, we did a whole look and feel for that, and created the environment for the first time ever that those that weren't official sponsors could actually buy into a corporate hospitality on the park and get kind of world-class food and the best tickets, and we won't go there. So, but we designed a whole environment. I didn't get any, believe you. Oh, and the wine. So Bibendum. So we did the wine. So we worked with Bibendum, and we have a consumer division at FutureBrand. And so Pete and his team, came to us, and Adam and I briefed them on the look and feel of the games. But they had to get their wine queues in, and they had wine from South Africa, and then the red was from Brazil, a nice link back to Rio. So they designed the labels based on the shards, based on sort of textures that represented the different countries. And actually very nice, great wine, and great labels, I think. And then Sainsbury's, and this is a kind of a much more functional project. We try to do something really, really sexy with it, but they said give us a Union Jack and give it in our colours and make it look like it's 2012. So they have, kind of broad and ranging brief. But we've given them something that works for them, and you'll see it on the TV now, and you see it on the lorries and in the store for to call out things. It's typical cardboard kind of point of sale work, and it has to do a certain job, and it does that job, and it's a sort of vernacular. So that's what it works to, using the key assets because they're a major sponsor. They can use the pictograms, etc. And there we go. So that was it. 5 minutes of the last kind of 4 years and 5 minutes, these were happy and glorious games, and I think they were amazing. And Adam and I were lucky enough to go and see the dress rehearsal for the opening ceremony, which was incredible. Danny Ball singing. We couldn't get there on the night, but we were invited to the dress rehearsal. And I was lucky enough to go on Wednesday night to the Paralympics, and I think that was almost just as bloody good. So I'm really pleased that it's actually continued on for these next weeks. So that was our work for 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.